KSW staff, clients, and friends joining us. We have our friends joining us. This is, we've looked at her, this lady, before, but man, she deserves so much more credit than she gets, because I don't hear that many people talking about her, but it's just, she was so influential to Bill Evans, and you just fall in love with her voice. Sounds like a female Chet Baker. So today we're going to look at and revisit Blossom Dearie.
What is all this talk about loving me, my sweet? I am not afraid, not anymore, not like before. Can't you understand me? Now, baby, please pull yourself together, do it soon. My soul's on fire, come on and take me. I'll be what you make me, my darling, my soul.
I didn't know who Blossom Dearie was. My brother, I think, introduced me to her first. But she's a jazz classic, and one of those classics that didn't get lost in because she's kind of a cult figure, well-known jazz figure, but she's not like some of those singers that I mentioned at the beginning of the class. She will talk about her life, but really she studied serious classical piano growing up, and then kind of started singing. So, but she's an excellent pianist, just as much of a singer, and made some beautiful recordings. And we're gonna take it nice today. It's gonna be really fun looking at the music of Blossom Dearie.
I wish you bluebirds in the spring to give your heart a song to sing, and then a kiss. But more than this, I wish you love. And in July, a lemonade to cool you in some leafy glade. I wish you health, and more than wealth, I wish you love.
So instantly, you're gonna recognize this kind of girly voice. It's a very light, girly voice. It's very that could almost sound like that would be annoying, but it's so lovely to listen to. It's breathy, it's intimate, it's fragile. It sounds like a kind of like a little girl. She's just, and she would have voice teachers telling her that she wasn't singing properly, that she wasn't breathing properly, that she wasn't, and she would kind of respond like, it's funny, after all these years I've been doing it this way, and I'm not the person to get up on stage and just belt it out. That's not me. I sit at a piano and have the microphone there. So she just found the style that worked for her. Born in 1924, and here's a little timeline of the piano players that we've been looking at. She lived a long time. She died in 2009 at 84, but Monk's going on, Bud Powell's going on, Bill Evans is going on. Those are the people that she's influencing, and we'll talk about that a little later. Supposedly received the name from a neighbor who delivered peaches when she was born. So, but she was at the age of 2, she was able to pick songs out on the family piano, and spent most of her years sitting on adults' laps so she could kind of go to the piano. So she was drawn at that young of an age to, and they said that she played very intelligently for somebody who was just 2. It wasn't just banging. It was she was drawn to the piano already. And at age 5 started studying classical piano, Bach, Chopin, much like Bill Evans did when he was a kid. I mean, they would study, you study the classics on piano. So at a really young age, she was playing. By 10, she sort of started getting into jazz. Count Basie, Benny Goodman, and Duke Ellington. And they would kind of form her piano playing style years to come. When she moved to New York City, in the mid-40s, she started singing more. So she, like I said, she didn't really start off as a singer. She started off as a pianist, and then she would just kind of start singing. And I think people just really liked her because she had such an unusual, pleasant-sounding, beautiful voice. And by the 60s in New York, she was sharing the bill with Miles Davis at the Village Vanguard. I mean, to play with Miles in the 60s, he was one of the most famous acts in the world going on. We talked about celebrities, politicians, people coming just to see Miles perform. It wasn't just an exclusive jazz thing. So she got fame that way. And Miles Davis was a huge Blossom Dearie fan and joked that she was the only white woman who ever had soul.
I'll take Manhattan, the Bronx and Staten Island too.
And she's different because she sort of was a cabaret lounge singer and not just a soloist performer. Like Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday. She'd kind of, and what I mean by cabaret lounge, she played the piano and she would sing at the piano. So she wouldn't go up there and perform a song. She kind of was like you would see typically at cabaret lounges. But of course, it wasn't just cheap music. It was, it was elevated. And she started hanging out with Gil Evans. We talked about Gil Evans a little bit, where he had this little apartment and he would, Miles Davis was obsessed with him. I mean, he went on to orchestrate a lot of Miles's albums, and he was a big teacher, Gil Evans. He learned a lot from jazz musicians too, but he, coming from a classical background, was a huge influence on a lot of the jazz musicians, including Blossom Dearie. And Blossom Dearie describes New York, and this is what's so wonderful about New York, especially in the 50s. She could go and hear Sarah Vaughan sing Embraceable You, and then she could go across town to Broadway and hear another version of that sung in a different way. And she was like, it's like hearing one singer from Mars and another from Pluto. There's different versions, and she's like, I tried to put them together. So again, it was just the influence of so much exciting culture happening in the city. And we do talk about this a lot, of artists finding their own voice by usually blending ideas, influences together. And how she would learn songs and perform songs, she would first have to sit down and learn the song at the piano, just without even singing it. Learn it, and then once she knew it so well, she would work on the lyrics. And she explained that the playing of piano and singing, they weren't separate in her mind. So her playing wasn't separate. They were just one and the same. And somebody that was hugely influenced by her was Bill Evans, which of course we did a class on, and is one of the most famous, pianists. We looked at how he did rootless voicings, how he incorporated Debussy, and we looked at some of his musical characteristics. But he was interviewed later by saying that she had a tremendous influence on his piano playing. And we've talked about chordal harmony with Oliver Nelson. If you remember, those chordal harmony is instead of playing stacked thirds and fifths, you play fourths, and that gives it a little bit more of a modern sound, a little bit. So she was playing a lot of this chordal harmony that Bill Evans copied from her and picked up from her, and completely thought she was really doing something new with the piano by playing these kind of harmonies. She wasn't trying to be anybody else, I think, when she was playing and when she was singing. I think that's part of the allure that I love about her. I mentioned Chet Baker. He was such an unconventional singer. He didn't have any vibrato, and when you hear, or reverb, and when you hear her performances, how vulnerable they are in the studio. Someone to Watch Over Me. There's no reverb. There's no effect. It's just her very close to the mic, almost like she's singing a lullaby to you. And it's so personal and right there that I love that. And she's not trying, there were all these great musicians and singers around her, but she was just being completely herself. She was this, little white girl in the 50s around, some of the most amazing black musicians that would change the music forever. And so what? That didn't bother her. I mean, it was just, she was learning. But I think her vulnerability in some of those ballads were just, and the way she played, and her piano playing was just so, it was such an interesting, no other performer could really do that, uniquely and that beautifully.
Ask me, how do I feel now that we're cozy?
So talk about somebody that had a unique, original voice. Blossom Dearie, wonderful singer, songwriter too, but and had a lot of success in the 70s and 80s and continued playing. But I love those recordings in the 50s.
So I hope you enjoyed Blossom Dearie. I mean, studied classical piano. Most of these guys studied classically, so it just gives you a good foundation for that. And then she started singing later on, but she got, she was such a great pianist first. And, lack of a better word, girly voice, right? Breathy, intimate, like Chet Baker, like I said. And then Miles was so important to her, like Evans and Gil Evans. And it's funny that, Miles was like, she was the only white woman who had soul. Miles really gave her a lot of recognition. And, but just so vulnerable on those ballads. Someone to Watch Over Me in particular. And that she and Evans use that chordal harmony, those fourths in that different sound. Such a lovely person. Seems like a lovely person, but I love her music so much. So hope you enjoy Blossom Dearie. Tomorrow we see your film score results for Hannah and Her Sisters. I can't wait for that. I can't wait to share that with you because you guys did an excellent job on that. Okay, have a great rest of the day and see you tomorrow. Bye.